yeah, I can't see you yet, but we will talk afterwards.
Yeah. So we'll get going and welcome everyone. As you can see, Lisa is really looking forward to seeing everyone after the session. I'd like to firstly acknowledge that I'm coming to you from the unceded lands of the Ngunnawal people and pay my respects to all elders and First Nation people wherever you might be in the audience, and also pay homage to your lands. And I would just like to introduce Lisa Roberts tonight. Lisa is an amazing animator, but she's also an amazing connector of people, and she has a project called Living Data, which is a very collaborative project and came out of her interest in the Southern Ocean and her work with Antarctica as an artist in residence. And it's a beautiful project which seems to be growing with time and connecting, which is why it's such a perfect alignment for her to be joining this community and this session program as well, because the Southern Ocean, of course, the image that you see on the all of the meeting of the waters information, that's actually where the Murray River joins the ocean, and that is the Southern Ocean. So there's this very strong connection to what we've been talking about. So we're looking towards the Southern Ocean with Lisa's work and how it connects all over Oceania and indeed the world. So how the session will run is Lisa will give a few words of introduction. Then we're going to give you a link to go and have a look at some animated videos, and then we will be regrouping here at about 7:05, so 30 minutes from now. Wherever you may be, so look at 30 minutes from now, and I'll hand over to Lisa, and then we'll have a discussion. Okay, thank you, Lisa. I'll turn my camera off now.
Okay, thanks, Tracy. Hello, everybody. It's very strange not being able to see you here, but I will. I'm just feeling so good about being amongst you at last, not being able to be heard with my fumbling with the technology, whatever. But I'm going to show you an animation, or it's actually a video that I've put together just in case I couldn't get the technology working. So it's like a recorded lecture, but it's kind of a workshop as well. So I made it specifically to show you some simple tools that I use that can be used with very simple, usually free technology and materials to tell your own story of relationship or your own story, whatever, using the language of animation. So I usually identify myself as an Australian with Aboriginal and European ancestry. I'm one of many, many people who do not know their country, their language, and who are quite often for that reason disconnected from people, including family members who have chosen not to identify in any way. And I'm accepting of that. Australia is full of people like me who have Aboriginal ancestry, and we know that through stories that have come down. So some of us are lucky enough to have an art language as well, music, dance, whatever. And I'm just very convinced that it's the arts that have the capacity to bring together people from all across the world to give that depth of meaning to the scientific data and the cultural practices and the stories that come from the different countries at a level we don't need to analyze. It's not academic. So I'll leave it there, and I've provided a link for you to go and explore. It's one link, but on that one link you'll see actually two videos, and the first video is the one, its first name was My Two-Way Learning Journey, and by two-way learning I mean what we're doing here in a bigger scale. We're telling our stories, we're listening to each other and growing and sharing knowledge.
Lisa, I've just shared the link, and the link's
Good.
come.
Good,
So,
because that link doesn't work actually on my Firefox browser. It works in other browsers, so that's why I'm to be sure that people have, someone to talk to if they're having similar problems. So on my system, it doesn't open up in Firefox, but I use a Linux system. So if it's not working, just try another browser.
Aisling,
Up here. It was cold yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lisa and I are betting on an ice age coming.
an ice age.
That's not the first time I've heard that, actually.
Yeah.
Maybe we all need to move to Darwin then.
Yep.
It's
Definitely.
not a bad place to be. The crocodiles, where would they go though?
Oh, we'd eat them. Definitely think that's the best thing for a crocodile.
Yeah.
They'll have a big crocodile festival.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's everybody.
So the technology worked okay at your end, everybody?
Yep.
Oh, good. So I thought I'd introduce Kat at this point, Tracy. Is that all right?
Yes, go for it. The floor is yours.
Okay, so this is my colleague, Kat Kudai. Very funny. And Kat can more accurately identify herself and her expertise and purpose. But I know Kat as the engineer, brilliant engineer who makes what I do possible. And I'd particularly like to draw your attention to the little stick figure on the top left of that page that you got. It's an animated figure, and Kat and I have been working on it in a data arena, which is like a big cake tin with data projectors all over the place. And Kat's a software engineer, and she's worked with her students there, and now she's at a CDU doing stuff. And the whole, and what we achieved in that data arena at UTS was making those nodes between the body parts interactive. So you could go in there and you could move the puppet, so you could actually get that kinesthetic experience, but virtually, of moving through the Southern Ocean and collecting, hearing things, seeing things, collecting knowledge that with the programming idea would be stored in the avatar that you would be using, and that would hold the stories and data, scientific data, because we combined them in this environment, that you could then access afterwards and chart your learning journey. Kat, would you like to talk to that?
That was great. My interest is in the way of combining knowledge. So how do we combine it? And I like using these images that help us see how we're combining the knowledge from different sources. Yeah. Well, thank you.
I introduced you now because I know there are some people who will have questions for both of us, and some of them I won't be able to answer them because they're a lot cleverer than me technologically, I know. Ros Bant, for example.
Oh, not really. For some things, maybe tiny little things. Certainly not this platform. We're all laughing at Ros being a Luddite in this arena.
This is wonderful to hear, Ros, because we've all been talking about how, we each know something, and people look up to us and think we're experts, but we're all learning, always.
It's all about the purpose, isn't it? Tools for courses,
Yeah. It's just nice to see people comfortable with that.
I think in the end it's about the expression, isn't it? And the rest is about finding the most appropriate mechanisms to navigate or tell the story or to engage other people in the story, so we can not only give them a personal experience but also kind of in some way guide them in terms of how the knowledge could be interpreted or read. Like it's kind of like providing like a map or framework, so you still get to express your message, but you still allow them, people who experience it, room to also develop their own understanding and take on it. But you still, embedded underneath that, you still have the core of your own personal message or voice as an artist, you know?
That's a really good point. I don't know if you remember, in the video I was saying that the arts are an intrinsic part of Indigenous language, but it's intrinsic to all of us, really. We all have a form of communicating that's more than words. Have I gone mute again?
No, it's good.
No? Okay. So that comment about telling your story and it being told in your particular way is great. And it's also how we listen. So when we're tuning into somebody else telling their story, our group were talking about this just the other day, that we translate when we're reading something or looking at somebody telling their story. We're processing that information in a way that we can understand. And then if we have the luxury, as we have like now, to have time to discuss that process of listening and responding, then we can all grow, because we can learn about somebody else's take, if you like, it's a terrible word, but on what they found in that, what they could connect with, I suppose, in their particular way. I think that's a really sort of interesting discussion. And we did that a lot, didn't we, Tracy, in our Zoom meetings last year? I don't believe it, yeah. Did that make sense, Kat?
Yeah, it was a really good process.
Yeah.
I fumble with words a lot because I'm not really comfortable lecturing. I'm not a lecturer. Yeah.
You're good at conversation though, Lisa, so don't do yourself a disservice.
Well, Kat and I often talk about, and we've had these discussions too, and I'm sure it's happening now with everybody in these groups, that when you're having a conversation with somebody, you find yourself saying things that you wouldn't normally have thought about, simply because you're with somebody who thinks differently, and so you have to kind of meet somewhere and new ideas come up. So I'm loving that these sessions are recorded, because those things are happening, and if we've experienced those moments, and sometimes they're just little moments, then you can go back and have a really closer look at that, and it can set you both on a new path.
Yeah, I told you I was talking to a filmmaker in Canada, and he asked me, "Oh, how do you think?" And I was looking at him blank for a second, and then I realized I had to start talking. I said, "Well, I actually think as I speak," and that's how I think. So it was, and he, of course, thought in images.
Yeah.
Whereas you think in motion, like the idea of the pedestrian, its motion and it's very important for the knowledge gathering.
Yeah. And a lot of us, I'm sure, because this is a select group, a lot of us think as we move, as we walk through country. Yeah.
Something I've noticed over the years, just in not only in my artistic creation or my artistic expression, but also just in my own process and self-development and that kind of stuff, is that when I engage different aspects of my being, so right, you've got your mind, you've got your physical body, you've got your emotional self or aspects. And it's like when I have my physical body active, this is just in response to what you were saying, Lisa, about walking country. It's like when my physical body is active, it allows a different kind of space. It's like that part of me is engaged in a process, so I'm not thinking. Or if I'm engaged in a conversation, sometimes my hand will just start painting. And it's like I'm not mentally connected to the process, but there's something that just emerges and comes out of that. And it's like a different part of me is allowed to speak when I shut different aspects of myself down, if that makes sense. But it's like also within my creative process that comes out quite often. Like it's like that balance between that intuitive, the unconscious and the conscious, and bringing that flow and that stream of just what's resting underneath and allowing that time and space to actually bubble up to the surface and emerge.
Yeah. I
And
think
that's
that's
where so I think that's where we get our patterns from. That sort of bubbling up of the commonalities, the aspects, yeah. Sorry, Lisa, you were saying.
Oh, no, I wasn't.
Hi, Lisa. I was wondering, why did you choose the krill as the basis of your research? Was it because it's one of the smallest animals in the sea, organisms in the sea, and it's eaten by bigger animals?
So, sorry, I missed the beginning of the question. Are you asking how...
Yeah, you chose the krill, for the krill dance, which I love very much.
Okay, so the krill actually chose me, I have to say. I went to Antarctica on a scientific expedition, and one of the main science projects was to bring krill up in a net and examine them for changes that are happening with the changing chemistry and temperature of the water. And I didn't even know krill existed at that point. This was in 2002. And I became fascinated by their movement. They had tanks there and I could watch them. And I was astounded to find, they're not that tiny actually, that they have both individual and collective behaviours. And that suddenly I realised that that was somehow interesting and important to learn about. And then I started to meet the scientists who spent their lives studying krill, but in quite different ways from my interest in krill. I was interested in their behaviours. And yeah, again, it was relationships. So my first relationship was with the krill on their own. I was in the fortunate position to be able to just watch them for hours, whereas the scientists were doing all sorts of other things, using the other side of the brain, as you might imagine. And then I had conversations with these scientists on the ship on the way home, and I was privy to a whole aspect of these people. You know, they're not just number crunchers. If you have that luxury again of spending time with people, you find what's driving their curiosity. And that krill sex animation was the result of many conversations with the world's top krill biologists. There are only a handful of them, mind you. It's a pretty weird subject of interest. And they all have quite an emotional attachment to those creatures. But they are doing their science quite often funded by the krill fisheries in Norway and such. So there's all this underlying commercial stuff that they have to grapple with. And their job is to protect the krill. So they're doing their science to ensure that the environment stays conducive to krill mating and proliferating and being happy stuff. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, and I found it a fascinating way of gaining information from the environment, taking something which is really small and opening it up to the dance or the way people, create dances. So I can see how someone looking at krill can use that in their community to create different kinds of dance. So I found that was really fascinating and a way of accessing knowledge in the world around us, even from the very tiniest, smallest beings in the world. So yeah, really great.
Yep. I have to pick you up on something. I'm sorry. smallest things you can't actually see with the naked eye. Krill eat phytoplankton or algae,
Yeah.
and they are beautiful things if you've ever seen them under, microscopic images. I'm sure some of you have. And so through the krill researchers, I met the phytoplankton researchers. And our friend Ellery Johnson, who you'll hear soon, is an expert in freshwater phytoplankton, copepods. Actually, they're quite large compared to the phytoplankton that we're dealing with. So I just got a call today from a phytoplankton expert in Hobart who wants to make an animation, or wants me to work with her on an animation to bring to life her science research about some very new species that they've decided to use as a to see how the species is changing with current changes. So it's cutting edge what's happening now. And I recommend you all to go and have a look at phytoplankton in the freshwater and saltwater systems. They are little spirit beings. They're like rock carving drawings. They're just so primal and so complex at the same time in their forms.
Yeah.
I'm sure they'll inspire some of you and you'll recognise them in some way.
Yeah, they're amazing, especially because they're composed of silicate. And some drawings have been made in the past, and they are very, very sculptural and really, really interesting. And I know the krill is not the smallest creature, but it was just a matter of saying,
Yeah, I understand where it came from. Yeah.
Actually, Lisa, I saw that your PhD was on primal symbols and things, and that's an area I'm really interested in. Is your PhD available? Is it published somewhere, the thesis?
Yes, it's actually animated.
Oh, wow.
So what you saw today was kind of an abstract, if you like, or a succinct, that bit with the krill in it. But no, the whole thing is on a website called antarcticanimation.com. That's what I called it. 2010, UNSW. I'd love you to go and have a look at that.
I'd love to have a look at it. Could you put the link up, Lisa? Would you be so kind?
Sure. You mean now in chat?
Oh, whenever, or on the participants document or something.
I've got it here, so I'll pop it in.
That'd be great.
Oh, thanks so much, Bronwyn. Yeah. No, look, we're all ahead of our time, bringing arts in as a language for understanding. I'm thrilled to be here. So what do you do, Bronwyn?
Well, I am a digital designer, and I also work with digital storytelling. So at the moment I'm doing lots of writing, actually. So I'm mainly writing at the moment, but I've done a lot of film and documentary, and I am interested. I've sort of shot and recorded radio features and documentaries, and I'm interested, though, to move more into Adobe After Effects. I've been really getting intrigued by what you can do with that, between that and projection. So I was very interested in your work. But I'm probably focusing more on writing at the moment, to be honest. But I am also interested visually in what we can do with, I particularly like line drawings, simple line drawings. I thought they were really lovely, those bits where you had the, I'm not sure what it was. It was kind of like almost like a harp, and then that was moving over a shot of Bradley talking.
Oh, yes, yes. Now, I didn't elaborate on that, Kat, in that particular context, because it is a bit of an explanation that has to be made. And I'm still grappling with getting open source software that can actually give me the capacity to make those clean line animations. I've been doing this for as long as you have, Ross, this sort of stuff. And the technology just keeps changing, doesn't it? And just when you've fallen in love with some tool or thing, it's gone. And so that's why I'm passionate about open source. So I've weaned myself off Photoshop and Premiere, and I only use open source. So I've been grappling at the moment with Paint and Inkscape. The latest versions of those free programs are pretty exceptional. They used to be really, really basic things that would come with your operating system, and I just wrote them off as rubbish. But I've learned something there. They're actually quite fabulous, particularly if you have a pressure-sensitive drawing pen and tablet. I recommend you go and look at Inkscape and KadenLive for putting it all together, because you can import individual frames into KadenLive in whatever way you make those images. And there's so much to talk about here, and I really want everyone to have my contact details. If any of you have a desire for a chat about any particular little thing, it helps me. It helps me grow in my understanding of what's possible. So I mean that.
Lisa,
yeah.
What was the name of that tool? KadenLive?
Yes, KadenLive. It's the name of the editing program. It's actually very like Photoshop. But of course, being an open source program, it can't just grab the Adobe things. That's illegal. So it's a bit overwhelming at first when you open it up, because everything's in a different place from what you're used to if you've been using the so-called industry standard ones. But it's quite empowering to get your head around at least some of those tools in open source, because you know that, prices might go up, you might lose your job, and you want to have those tools with you and always available.
There was a question too in the chat, Lisa, about Len Lyes' old brain.
Oh, yeah. That's exciting, isn't it? Who asked that question? And
Fiona, would you like to go into that in a little bit more detail with us?
Yeah. Fiona?
Yeah. Thanks, Lisa. It was so fantastic to watch your videos, and I love the the iPhone strapped to the shoebox over the sink. I'm just loving it. I love it. Len Lyes, really interested me, of course, for a long time, but I hadn't heard that quote. If you could tell me a bit more about that, it would be great.
All I can say about that quote is that it was said, and you can hear the voice saying it, by an artist, a New Zealand artist, Phil Dadson, who you probably know, Roz. He's an experimental. Do you know Phil?
Yeah, we worked together in New Zealand many moons ago for the Wellington Festival. Yeah, with John Gibson from the Phil Glass Band, all the bands, my band, Lime, a whole bunch of us.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
We both had sewer pipe percussion bands, which we did Mutation, and his were all boys and mine were all girls, so it was very fun. But he was very funny about not wanting to collaborate.
Really?
John Gibson, yeah, we went in. There are other stories. I'll be quiet now. We've got to answer this question. That's very good.
Okay, so I met Phil in Buenos Aires at an Art and Science, Antarctic Art and Science conference, and it was all about the arts. And Phil just sat with me one day and had seen my animations, and he just talked. So that's all that was. So it was out of the mouth of Phil Dadson on the spur of the moment. And it was a very noisy environment, so that's why I had to transcript that. But it's a pretty cool concept, isn't it?
It is.
Len Lyes.
I suppose it's going back to that whole sort of, automatic poetry, surrealist type, all those sort of early techniques. But it would be great to learn more about some of the techniques and tools. I love the the second one with Australia, you know, and the dots sort of
The rivers.
Yeah, the rivers. Yeah. So
Yeah.
how are you doing that? Is that a data thing or?
Very easily. So I've got this drawing tablet. Can you see? I don't know. You can see it.
Right.
And,
Yep.
and a pen.
Yeah.
And I just traced a map. I put the map, a printout, and I just put sticky tape around my tablet, and I just traced it. But it took a long, long time because I dot by dot. So every frame had.
It's an animation dot by dot.
Yeah, it's an animation. And I did it by hand.
Yeah.
And I did
that's
it.
why it's so good.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm glad you appreciate it.
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I did that in GIF.
Yeah. Because I went to a Hockney exhibition that was at the NGV a few years ago, and he was using an iPad animation type program where he would draw and as he drew, it kept a history of each line, and then he could just, you know, that program. Yeah. Is that sort of the things that you're using? No,
I steer clear of anything automated as much as I can. But I'm a complete hypocrite because as soon as I said that, when I started animating, there was a program by Autodesk Animator Pro, it was called. It doesn't exist anymore. And it allowed tweening. So you'd make a polymorphic shape that you could set to tween, say, from this shape to that.
Oh, yeah.
And that's automated. That's fun. But for me, it's only fun if you do something with it like hand draw as well, so that people will look at it and they think, how did that happen? I really hate just, oh, yeah, that's Photoshop or that's Flash or Adobe. And this is where your individual language or art expression comes in. Like, nobody else can do what you do. And I love that. I wasn't trained in graphic design. I didn't want a job in graphic design for that reason. I don't know if this topic's come up, but for me, the art is the spirit, if you like. It's the spirit connection. And I know you talk about that, and Ros, that the music is a response, or the sound, sorry. You go out and correct me if I've misunderstood, but I met you a long time ago, and this is the memory I have, that you go into the world and you listen and you respond in sound.
It's natural in Australia. We're a sun country. It's, you know, I've always never taken anything for granted. And I was always immersed riding bareback through the bush as a child by the sea. So that was much more formative than my PhD on being an analytical musicologist.
I can relate to that.
But it's very heartening in the growth of all of this talk to have respect like you have with the Len Lyes film. That was so beautiful. That really touched me. And the other thing is that, you know, we can explore and make new tangos together, and that is just, you know, what comes next. It might be time for a collaboration, Lisa.
Yeah.
You never know. I haven't drawn on those iPads, but, you know, I do Sumier, the ink painting.
Oh, yes.
So, and I haven't done it digitally, and I'm just wanting to pack up a whole PDF of my scores and free notations for people to have in the last half of my fellowship. And I'm all inspired now, thinking maybe it should all be full of animations and have little particles of the score all flying off.
Why not?
But it's so great that the PhD you did was able to include this sort of work, because when I did all of my audio in my PhD, it was just way too hard for Australia. And at least now we've got this. The thing about that I have, of course, have had more trouble with this, that I have tried to pioneer sound as the dominant paradigm and living in surround sound, which is so expensive and hard to reform all the time. Yeah. And to sit down and have that equipment behind a Mickey Mouse sort of entertainment screen really gives me the irk. So because I'm wanting to have the whole body floating in this huge environment of molecular sound, like 8 channels of sea urchin hydrophone recordings are ready, but I can't get them into a space, can I? So what am I doing? I'm going out in a boat with the Jawbone Marine that are within 10K, and she's giving me photos of the sea urchins that she can get near because she's a diver. I've only been out in the bay once in the whole of the last thing, so God knows when we're ever going to get to see that. And then I'm thinking, well, maybe I've just got to animate now. Yeah, maybe this is it. So I actually did start a little project, having 2 premieres just knocked off recently, with a curator I don't even know, a Japanese guy that's approached me quite a few times to have a little animation made from materials that I supplied him with. So that's as far as I'm gone. So I mean, it's so interesting to see what you've done, Lisa. And I keep getting you mixed up with another Lisa Roberts, who is a jazz singer.
Not me.
No. She was very good too. She was recommended for she was a big high up in the national awards as well one year for the musician of the Melbourne musician. And I looked at you and I thought, I'm sure it's not her, but I know I've met you, so I don't know when that was. But thank you so much for your presentation. And this is lovely to have some reconnections and to find all these amazing people. Aren't we so lucky? Yes. This is the best thing. This is the whole heart and soul of this thing. I'm very inspired. Thank you. That's enough from me now.
Thank you, Roz.
Yeah. Lisa, I was wondering how you... Oh.
Go ahead, Bronwyn. I'm just hanging out in the dark here.
It was a technical question, really. There was a shot I remember seeing, and it had leaves in white fluttering over, and I think it was a shot of krill, but I assume the leaves were on a transparent background, so I was just curious to know how you did that.
Leaves? You sure
they looked like leaves to me. Perhaps they were flakes of something, I'm not sure, but it was like over a video image, and they were all white. And
wasn't that the phytoplankton?
No, this was along a river, along the Darling, or near there, and they were actually white moths. Actually, they were there. It wasn't a layer. I didn't make it up. I was just video recorded what was there. Yes.
Wow.
I know. It was evening. It was at Brewarrina. I'd just been to the fish traps, and it was getting dark, and these white moths just descended all over the place. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, that's amazing, because there I was thinking, oh, that's really interesting animation. How did you manage that? Yeah, because they look very, very organic, and I thought, well, that would be against a transparent. Okay, so it was just against. They were real moths. Okay, thank you.
Hi, Lisa. Dean over here, and I really am hanging out in the dark. It's in the middle of the night here, and I'm in bed. Anyway, I wanted to say that I really loved your work and your comment about hand drawing rather than automating. I wanted to make a comment about that and also ask you a question about that. There's something about a drawing practice or any practice that's utilizes what we may call like slow media today, right? And so one of the things that in the workshops that I do around digital storytelling that makes some interactive interfaces is that I work with people to develop their stories, and then they embroider them, like really old craft techniques of embroidery with conductive threads. And then that, of course, gets hooked up to a microprocessor, and then you hear their story through touching the embroidery. But they've often said that in that process of the embroidery, which takes a long time, that they come to know their story differently, even though it's thought about and written and maybe already recorded. But they internalize it differently, and they often feel that the reception of the audience is equally, I guess, engaged or deep. So my question to you is, because you're doing it in a non-automated way, how does that change your understanding of the story that you're telling, and how do you think it changes the reception for the audience?
Well, I think you've already said it, and some of the others have remarked on the difference. If it looks hand-drawn or frame-by-frame animated or whatever manual process, you can identify with it in a bodily way, and it gives incredible depths of meaning that only you can know. Somebody else can look at it and have a different bodily response, which of course comes from their life experience.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I don't know if I've answered any question there, but I'm just so impressed by what you've described of your process of using this woven material. I think I can relate to that. I don't weave, but I sometimes think of animation as a kind of threading together of elements to together make something. Yeah.
That's beautiful. I love that idea of threading together of elements to make something. And sometimes, I don't know if this is true for you, but I'm wondering if, in that design process, it's like a lived design process. Do you change where you're going with it, or do you know, because you've storyboarded it, you really just have to get this thing done?
I hate storyboarding.
Okay.
I only do it when I'm working with people who need that. It's just a translation tool for me, and it has to be open to change. Yes, the answer is absolutely yes. I definitely change through the process of creating. And I think next week when we talk, Kat and Tracy, about the way we put together this, well, it's a paper that we made, a hybrid form of paper that combines animations and poetry and dance with scientific analysis and data. And it got published in the Frontiers Journal, which is a scientific journal for ecology and evolution. And that was to me, that's something I've never done before. And we spent a lot of time doing what we're doing right now, just talking. And each one of us has, I'd say, yes, Tracy, there are quite a few of us in the group, but I'd say we've all changed through that process. We've all come to understand something more about ourselves because we've been challenged by each other, and we're all very different.
I agree, Lisa.
Yeah.
And it's that weaving analogy comes to my mind, that's what we were doing, in that we were weaving together our thoughts, our experiences and our own knowledges, and from that we start to create something that has its own life. I just put a comment in the chat, Lisa. I just love the weaving analogy with animations, because when I make video, I often think of it as a process of weaving as well, because you have layers and you have to put things over and under, and so it was a beautiful analogy.
I'd just also like to speak to that in terms of process as well. But I'm primarily a photographer, and I actually have had to find a way to embody my physical self within the work. So I take these self-portraits within nature, which are it's a process of spontaneous unfoldment. It's like I just decide in the morning, I put on the dress, I go and I do it. Like, it's totally not planned either. And I find that there is an aspect of creativity in general that is that when you allow for that more embodied experience, and I don't know, maybe the other digital makers in the room can speak to this, but I find that the digital can sometimes be a little bit cold or a little bit empty. And then I, like on a personal level, I feel that there's a layer that's missing that I need to add in some sort of more hands-on kind of way, which is how I introduce performance then within the work as well. And then the other thing, Lisa, that I'm in full agreement with you on, I'd like to hear you speak more about, is this the space and the role of the artist in terms of the times that we're living in now, and creating up those spaces for dialogue and creating up those spaces where we can open up this conversation that really needs to be had about the changes that need to come, and just that privileged position that we're in, because we don't have to justify ourselves to anybody. We don't have to, we're not answerable to anybody, let's say. So that gives us this wonderful platform and space to invite other people into a dialogue to express.
Well, I don't know if I made it clear, but I do actually have responsibilities, and I'm not totally free in my position. I'm artist in residence in the Faculty of Science at UTS. And it's not that I want to do anything other than I am doing. I don't know how to say this. It's not just my personal expression that I'm developing, or an art practice, if you like. I just spend time with a lot of scientists and other artists who want to come in. Very informal, very organic, and so, but it's always very focused on, we all share a question, a burning question, and the burning question that we shared over those months, really, Tracy, when we were co-authoring that paper and co-authoring the animated interactive map, was how can Indigenous, dreaming stories, how can they align, or do they, any of them, align with what we know from the scientific method about the climate cycles and disruptions to these cycles? So that was a burning question for us. It was something we were already passionate about. And then Andrew Constable, who's a senior scientist at the Antarctic Division, just retired actually. He's now working with University of Tasmania. He challenged me years ago to initiate a living data project to culminate next year at the with all the IPCC reportings of how Australia is measuring up to the Paris Agreement. So that was the challenge that he cast me. And it's been a long time coming, but it sort of attracted people. And now the idea is that we're a network, and you're a network, and we're kind of, I think from just what I've heard so far from you is that you're all hubs. We're all hubs connecting, and that's so powerful. And we don't all have to be on the same web, if you like. That's a word that Tracy used, which is tentacular, which I love, and I think you have to be if you want to be part of something bigger and not feel like you own it or you're the expert or anything like that. And I don't know if it's the age either with me. I just feel so strongly that I haven't wanted to work in the existing education system because I just find so much disengaged. It's disengaged from what's going on with the land. And this is a way of passing on knowledge or contributing whatever little bit of experience that I've had and sharing it and finding what I can learn through that two-way learning process. Yeah, I just feel this huge responsibility for us to be ourselves. And so that's where the freedom of expression comes in. You've got to be yourself. But I'm more and more meeting people who share this sense of responsibility to pass on knowledge to the younger generations, because it's not happening. It hasn't been happening. It is happening now. Yeah. Am I being idealistic, or does anyone else have that sense that things are changing?
I'm idealistic too.
Yeah.
I'm with you there. What did Brad say? The 3 T's. Trust, time, and tea.
Yes.
I think that sort of, for me, really resonated.
Yeah.
I think it is so important, the way that we frame the stories. You know, when I wrote in my undergraduate degree, I was writing an essay about the cultural revitalisation practices of Southeast Australian Indigenous peoples through the arts. And I started to share what I was discovering through this research with my friends and people around me, who all are people that support growing Indigenous awareness. And so many of them shut down these conversations that I wanted to start about what's surviving, because they said, oh, how can you say that? You need to speak about what's been lost. And I started to look into that as well and realize that that's part of the dominant narrative. And it's not to say at all, we can't let what has been lost eclipse what is still remains and what is growing, and the fact that the culture is living. And it's so important to place it in that active term of what we're doing today and for the future, I find.
For sure.
Also just
Absolutely.
Sorry, Tracy, go on.
I was just thinking, as you said that, thanks, Aisling, of that expression, always was, always will be. You know, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The knowledge comes from the land, and we haven't lost the land, so the knowledge is still there. This idea of loss is very, very disrespectful, I think.
Mm.
But,
We are losing the land in the Pacific.
No, there's that true. Yeah.
No, but I think the role of art, or the way, like, I come from more like a political activism background, but then kind of got more reflective in my own inner journey, let's say, and I'm kind of now blending the two together again. But I mean, the one thing that always springs to mind is that during the revolution that the artists put out first, and that there's some other side to that, which is basically because we're the ones that cause people to question, or we're the ones that provoke a response, like, because it's not necessarily we're trying to jam home our message. We just want somebody to come in and have an experience and have a visceral experience of what we've created. And whether that is that they have an innate hatred to the whatever they're experiencing, or they have a positive, I guess the goal for me is, as long as there's a response, as long as they have engaged with the work on some level, to have an actual response to what they're experiencing or seeing. And that is, I see that as the role, and that is that ability that we can open up a dialogue box that because we can communicate with, like, all sorts of people in all walks of life. And it's kind of, we create that space where those dialogues can happen and emerge and open up. But it's just, I kind of feel like it's just our role to create the space, and then step away and allow that organic unfoldment of people's responses to the work in a way to just kind of develop coming out the back of that. And that is the role of the role and the special position that we're in as artists, because we engage people to have emotional responses, we engage feeling, we engage or we provoke feeling in response. I'm done now, I think.
Yeah. Beautifully said.
I was going to say, as an Australian living in the UK, I actually realise how lucky we are in Australia because we've still got a living tradition. And here, you can feel things when you're in the landscape, but you don't actually understand them necessarily. You just don't have the tissue frames of reference, and there are so many question marks. So, and I've felt that so strongly ever since I've been here, that so much in prehistory is just unknown and unrealised and unrecognised. And yeah, so I feel like there is something really exciting about being Australian and being able to have dialogues, not just with people in Australia, but being aware and living in collaboration with a living tradition as well. I'm not quite sure where we're leading. I'm really, really glad we're having these conversations. And I really don't know where we're leading because I've grown up living in houses and going to get my food from the supermarket, and any nature connection work I do is very much framed, and limited and linked to that reality. So I really don't know where we're going, but it seems like obviously we need to go there. Just a thought.
Yeah.
I actually stumbled on this course because I was searching for answers about land-based actions having more connection, and more way of understanding the land and understanding what needs to happen and how to heal it. So I'm quite really happily surprised that it's heavily orientated around art and it's weaving a lot of traditional stuff into it because it's lacking. It's lacking in my industry at a ground level because it only happens with higher levels with relationship holders. And those communications don't necessarily go down to the ground, and the ground doesn't normally necessarily go up to those relationship holders. So you have this gap and you have this massive inability to work in this space and do the things that you know that might help. You don't get the funding, the support, the scientific research doesn't always get to you at the right time. A lot of the stuff I'm reading now is 10 years old, and granted my own life choices have delayed some of that with family time, but I'm not the only one who is lacking a lot of this knowledge and a lot of this understanding, even where legislations are involved. And it's really just comforting to know that the arts are taking on this job because it's not happening necessarily where it should be in those levels as well. And like there's just simple little things that I'd like to do. Like today I cut out weeds. I just cut and painted weeds. But knowing that is also too a life force. It's hard, like when you put so much into what you do and like, okay, so if I'm taking out this weed, what's going to grow in this space? Is there seed on the weed that I leave? Is that seed then just going to create more and this erosion? And there's just so many layers, the on-ground works that just don't have enough weaved into it. And as a land manager, you have to constantly thinking what my management today is going to cause down the track, because I've been involved in projects where we've over-managed threatened species and then we've lost them because we haven't stopped and paused and seen what's happening or actually looked at the proper data or had the stuff available to us. It's all, and it doesn't filter down and up the right way. It's really halted, and it's really sad. And when you ask questions, you don't necessarily get these answers back. So I'm enjoying this experience because it's providing me with some kind of, I guess, answers on some level that I might be able to then use on another plane in the other work. So I don't know how that sits with everyone. It's honest. It's a really hard job to be on ground in, because everyone expects you to have this superpower knowledge about everything and you just don't. You know, little bits of everything, but not enough to make proper long-term management plans and actions without bigger discussions that you just don't get the time or the audience or the chair at the table to have them.
Yeah. Are you a scientist?
No,
Tracy,
I'm a park ranger.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Well,
Fascinating.
yeah. No, I've heard your story before from other park rangers, and also conservation biologists and freshwater ecologists. Yeah, it's like if you're in the university system or any government system for caring for country, you're beholden to usually 3-year funding cycles and stuff like that. Whereas the beauty of what we do is, well, most of us, I think, because we're rebels, we just do it. And if there's funding, that's kind of bonus. It's hard to explain and make attractive, because the more of us who keep doing this, the clearer it is what's happening. Like, we are changing things collectively around the world, I believe, the artists and scientists who are having conversations. And nobody's inviting us. I go around back doors. You know, when I did my PhD, I never went round to the front desk. I would sneak in the back illegally to talk to scientists, because they don't want us to have these sort of times together or to challenge the status quo. I'm absolutely all for artists doing PhDs, don't get me wrong. But you have to be tough and just make those bridges that at the moment don't seem to exist. And it's just because they haven't seen things that can be done. And now that there's so much more, and it's becoming more visible because of such online presences as we're creating, I'm optimistic that there'll be more heart in the science from these interactions.
Can I add something to that, please? Because I totally agree with everything you just said, Lisa, and also, you know, it's through science actually being open to engaging with the arts, you know, and I want to give a nod to University of Canberra and Ross Thompson and the Centre for Water Science. If I had have applied to the Australia Council or to ACT Arts or any of the arts bodies, we would not be here. So they're the ones who actually funded this program, you know, so it's like your comment about the back doors. It's like I've given up as an artist trying to get money through the arts because it's so hard. It is a tough slog. But if there's goodwill in other realms and that willingness to collaborate, perhaps there could be support for that work as well. So I think it's a really, I think it's a really exciting time for this kind of collaboration to be starting to build. I feel a sense of energy building around it. I mean, I don't know how other people feel, but I certainly feel that sense of energy really building and that desire to cross those disciplinary walls and share.
Sorry.
No, I'm just, Tracy's bang on. It's the other realms is exactly where I think there is an aspect of that. Like, I think as artists, the more we develop our practice, we open ourselves up to receiving and connecting, and also this is where maybe our interest within the sacred knowledge lies in the Indigenous communities and everything, and certainly maybe all the artists within this space have an appreciation towards that, because it's almost like, in terms of the body energetic and the chakra system, all that stuff, it's about this flow of ideas and this opening up of something that's actually coming through us. And I think it's like we have this open channel, and that we've gotten through that because we've spent years practicing our freedom of expression and our authentic expression and figuring out what the hell we want to say. And I think that is what's crucially important, and that's where the heart comes in. And I even find in the art space, there's a very contemporary scene which is very heady based, and it's no heart at all. And I think the real impact on a subconscious level to masses of people who view and engage with our work is that subconscious element, and that process of channeling through and connected and all that stuff. Like, and I think that is something we've spent years developing and homing and opening ourselves up to, and that almost it's like it just comes through us then on some level. Sorry, we're going a bit woo woo, but that's
no, it's all to do with the passion. You know, last night on television, I saw this fabulous communication scientist who was just like an artist. She just was delivering all of her science with incredible empowerment. She must have been 30 or something. And it was just so great. She was talking about putting drones, things in Wales with drones without touching them and not interfering. Somebody else probably saw this. I think it was on after the news or something. And I just thought, you know, it's all a completely different landscape now with possibilities. Of course, you're going to get, I find the universities and the shutdown funding bodies are very boundary. And that tends to, like when I was artist in residence, I had this at the aquarium in the 2000s. I was told that we weren't allowed to say anything about what they were doing, dredging the Port Phillip Bay then. And I was doing krill recordings with my hydrophone at this point, the submarine one, cost $5,000. And, you know, we found out that there was a dawn chorus in the shark tank, even when the lights were on artificially. They knew when all these things were going. And so there's always been this mismatch of observation and curiosity, or they've all gone home and you're still there because your computer has to run all night. So you're still there making sure it doesn't crash. They've gone home, so they didn't experience it. This sort of thing, you know. When you're an artist, you're just there. And the fulfillment of passion, I'm finding it with a lot of younger people that are into quantum physics and, you know, the Ravelli kind of deep time scientists are great. I have a fabulous person that's head of parallel universes and black holes at Columbia in the US, and she came out to our acoustic sanctuary and I wanted to show her the Milky Way, and she said, "Oh, I don't do stars." She didn't want to look up, you know. So she'd come all this way. And that was okay because, you know, her partner was a fantastically emotive body somatic dancing. And he just did this fabulous thing out there, and I dressed him up with all this native grass, and he had a sort of an Indigenous Australian experience out in the bush. But she didn't. She just sat inside with a glass of wine. And that was very telling for me. Now, in that time, I think that sort of division has changed a huge amount, or there wouldn't be the Leah Barclays of this world teaching kids to build hydrophones in the morning, and then they've got them in the River Seine in the afternoon, and it's all online at the end of that. And tomorrow there's her field trip on Horizon, and one of our members is the keynote, Sue. And I think that I sent a link to Tracy. Maybe you could put that up in the chat or something. If people wanted to go on a field trip online in the morning, the presenters are really great. It relates very much into this whole scenario. And there'll be quite a few interesting people that have jobs in interesting places. It's like, where do all the Indigenous guys, knowledge holders, end up? Well, I used to be in the Australia Centre with Tony Burke. What's his name? Yeah, who's a writer. And, you know, he ended up in the environment. Where do people put themselves? Bruce Pascoe, he's in, you know, whatever he's in, geology or geosciences or something. You can't divide the disciplines up in the environment. And this all has to collapse and be just got away with. For me, sound bleeds and it goes through walls, and you can hear people through buildings, and you can spy on them through your hydrophone and hear everything. So, you know, sound for me is just the best, because you don't have to, you know, worry if they've, you know, haven't been to the hairdresser or whatever else. You're doing the deep listening stuff about all the qualities of the sound of their voice. What's in that voice? Are they speaking from the heart? You can hear it straight away. 2 seconds. And when I was in the Australia Centre for this elite place at Melbourne Uni for interdisciplinary scholars, there were all these historians there, mainly war historians, who were writing up, you know, what Australia is and all the rest of it. And they were all busy making sound recordings of stories and then editing out of them all and cutting up all of the sentences and then republishing it as their story. Well, I just went Burko. So I think I spent the whole time I was doing the sound design project, I was trying to retrain them to give cred to the authentic voice teller. You shouldn't be telling the stories, multi-vocal stories. I had been doing this for 10 years with installation, letting the original voice tell the story.
Yeah.
What then? You're reframing them as soon as you've cut them up or whatever else. So, you know, I'm interested in what happens now, like 20 years later. Repatriating, is how much of that is necessary, what's what, how authentic was it, according to whom. And I think tomorrow at 5 we're going to have a great session. I can't wait for this ethics session because I got so many questions about the reappropriation of material and, you know, how do we go on from here and all the things that are getting lost and things. Maybe that's a good thing, because we've all got to move and change real quick now, because humans are too slow. We're not mutating fast enough to keep up with the viruses. And we're not clever enough. We're too slow. I can hear somebody saying, keep up, in my house, keep up, which is probably why I'm doing this course. So I'm not such a Luddite with my new phone and all this stuff. You'll be pleased to know, Git, that I've now got my phone and my computer talking to each other. So, you know, I've got 3 phones and 4 computers, so I use them for all different things, and you know, so I have a tool for a job kind of thing.
Yeah.
So to have a dominant template like this is really not comfortable for this girl, but I'm trying my best to learn all the bits and pieces. And I hand it over to you, Lisa, for all of the things that you've done since I've seen you. And I look forward to thinking about maybe animating some of my scores. But we have a lot of top-down animation, visual things, and then everybody watches the pretty pictures going across the screen, and they don't listen fully. And they don't move around in relation to the sound. Well, you know, if you were an Aboriginal person, you wouldn't have any dinner because you would have missed the kangaroo. You know, because you've got to listen before it arrives. You've got to know exactly where it's coming from and see the grass move, or hear it before you see it. Yeah? So this sort of like attentiveness has to be in the full body for me.
Which means that it has to be
an Australian way.
Has to be an immersive experience for an audience then. Like it's like it needs to be multi-sensory, needs to be across platforms. I love to engage people and participate. Exactly. And so that it becomes a lived experience for them also. Like to
give them agency over it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. But also to provide a loose framework with which you're kind of have a within the space. Like I work with kind of images and sculptural pieces and audio tracks and everything. So it's like really cross-platform. But it's like there is a pathway, and this is something I'm learning as I'm developing my practice. It's like I am learning how to create the narrative of the space. So there's a natural flow for most people that most people will naturally go station 1, station 2, station 3, station 4. But then there's also the room to totally disregard that if your brain doesn't work in that way. But that it does become this natural flow within the space, or a narrative kind of embedded within the space to help people to engage with the work. And also, I'm also looking forward to tomorrow, because it's just like I'm suddenly remembering that when I came to all this, I came from documentary, and my thesis was around truth and representation. And it's something I battle with continuously with my practice. I just returned from Greece, started doing some work there in the burnt woodlands, and I found myself struggling. Do I tell their story, or do I do my conceptual work? And then I recorded some short videos. It was raining. I sat in the car for 3 hours, and I did these short videos just to entertain myself. And then I accidentally ended up deleting most of them. And the only one that was left was my personal experience of those 4 days that I had there. Everything else was gone. And I was like, okay, not my stories to tell.
Yeah, it's happened to me too. But you got a long way. You went a long way to get to that story. So, you know, it's all in there, really.
Yeah.
I tried, in 1987, I invented an 8-channel audience interactive performance playback for the audience. So you came into an installation and their bodies moved and changed the sound field according to how long they stayed and where they were. So there would be 8 speakers in sculptures. And as they all moved around, they had to understand that everybody was sharing the listening space, because they had little boards and it was sensor activated back in the day. And I'm trying to get this digitally now, and it's just so clunky. You're going to be on one little USB off the back of a Mac with a huge sound card that's animating, 25 gigabytes or more of sound. And it's just not really handling the beautiful way that I used to be able to, in analog, turn off all the white fellas and just have the black fellas speaking for a while in the space. It's the only time these people that I recorded ever went to the Mildura Art Gallery, because they could hear themselves. They never heard themselves in an art gallery back then. This is 1985, I don't know, 92 or something. And that made me realise just what a player this kind of technology is, where you can, one, give the audience a really fully embodied sound about they've got choices about how long they go in there. I always had them for free, and how long you stay there. So there are some things like this in early museum design, and then it was all too hard and too expensive, and everybody just went on to storyboards. Even the Melbourne Museum had a beautiful thing, and then they just collapsed all this embodied stuff, giving it to the audience to discover at their own rate. And they, it became like cigarette machines. Interactivity was a push button. So in the aquarium, I'd already stopped doing this in audience interactive. When I went into the aquarium, I pushed the button for the groper fish, and it wasn't the right sound that they had. So they're misinforming through all of this stuff. I just, that was a corker of a residency. You can imagine. Here I am trying to teach kids. We're doing live all-night fish recordings in the shark tank, and the kids are feeding the sharks in front of them and hearing the sound from the hydrophones there in, what was that, 2003. No one was doing this sort of stuff. And then they've got this wrong fish in their push button thing. And then the guy that ran the museum who lived in Singapore and was telling me I couldn't make videos of the jellyfish, which I did, and they're all over the web and they're fantastic. He wanted to tell me I could never use them again, and that they would be in Singapore and that would be my residency. And he was a slime bag. So that was the end of that. I just didn't let him have them because that was stupid, That was just a completely no-go. We did everything we were asked to and more in that gig, and we were great. We had a fabulous time with the kids. But this thing about us all being together and who's it for? And, if this is for education, this was about us helping them to experience and have a touch sound experience by putting their hands into these places with the sharks while they were eating, and being part of and hearing it coming out. They were only elephant sharks. They weren't dangerous. It was a touchy-feely tank, So it was very exciting for all of us. And that excitement of the work has to be the thing. And that goes over every art, science, whoever. It's all about the degree of excitement in the person and how totally on they are about their stuff. And I find that just goes across all boundaries.
And you've got lots of it, which is cool.
Well, it's much better if you have a couple of full-time research assistants, to code and do stuff you need. So I've been a bit spoilt with that side of things in my past. And they're all professors, so that's all good. You know, there are lots of that next generation is amazing.
Ros, I'll introduce you to Professor William Gladstone, who's recently retired. He used to be my academic supervisor at UTS.
Was he down at Tassie, did you tell me?
No, he's in Sydney.
Oh,
but
yeah,
you need to connect somehow, because he's spent his entire life studying sex in the sea.
Yes, that's great. Well, I'm working on the sea urchins. I've done 3 years of it now, and I've got a lot of things ready, and I want to put them out where people can be under the sea and feel all of these. I've got fabulous krill recordings, you know. Did you do hydrophone recordings of krill as part of your animation?
The scientists on the ship did, yes. They're doing lots of them right now.
They sound amazing. Yeah, they're wonderful. I've got stacks. You can have a listen in the Barwon Listening Project. There's Vicky and I are doing the, listening to the river. Yeah. So there's lots and lots of hydrophone recordings. I've got a 6-channel rig now and an ambisonic in the kayak live streaming this time last year we did with Leah for what they're doing tomorrow field trip.
You just reminded me, Lisa, too, about Bill Gladstone, because he used to work with my husband on the Great Barrier Reef.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
There you go. We're family. We are family.
There's so many interesting people around. It's incredible.
Oh. All these watery connections.
Yeah, we'll all dissolve in the end. Or granulation dissolve.
I've been thinking a lot about copyright and data sovereignty and all these, who has permission to tell whose story. And I've simplified it for myself, because I don't tell other people's stories. All I can do is tell my own story. So when I'm in conversation with a scientist and we're sharing stories and we're having an experience together, whatever I end up doing, like that krill sex animation is an example, that's my story as much as theirs. So that avoids the whole copyright agency blah blah, That's my principle of operation now. All I can do is tell my own story, but it's always in relation to other people and places. And so I'm totally responsible. If I do something that somebody objects to, come to me. Don't go to any legal body or try and sue me. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Totally on the same page. It should be an interesting session tomorrow, because I have invited Erin O'Donnell, who's worked with Brendan Kennedy. She's actually more of a lawyer around water rights, but I just asked her if she'd be interested in joining us, because she's a legal eagle.
Yeah,
and she said that. Yeah, she said that it's not her special area, but she'd be happy to join in the conversation. And the other person who I hope will join is Marta Fariholka, who Lisa's heard me talk about many times. She's an elder from Parihaka, and I've worked with her, collaborated with her on a few projects over the years, and she's reinvigorated traditional practices around deathing, Māori practices, and she's just an amazing woman with really strong mana, and I think just her perspective will be really interesting to bring to the table. So wonderful. I think it'll be a really good conversation. I have no idea what will happen. We'll just add water and see.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you. And thank you, Lisa. Terrific.
Yeah. It's been a wonderful session. Does anyone else have any other questions or comments? I'm conscious that it's 8:25, so we probably want to wrap up pretty soon. Otherwise, I'll never get out of my chair.
I've got to standing up now and doing Tai Chi while this is going on.
It's good. I love it.
See what's happening below the waist.
I've got my standing desk. No, it's not.
Yeah.
It's
No.
good to keep moving.